Hi, you're listening to Burn Beautiful, a podcast for women ready to step into their divine feminine leadership so they can create a life of joy, health, and impact beyond their wildest dreams. Here, you'll learn how to heal stress from the inside out, reclaim your vibrant health, and master your energy so you can lead powerfully without burning out and actually enjoy the moments that matter most in this one beautiful and precious life. I'm Nicole Whitaker, burnout and leadership coach, founder of Lead Up Health, and creator of the HERS method. Welcome. Hey y'all, welcome to Burn Beautiful. My name's Nicole Whitaker and I will be your host today. And we're talking about a major question today. Should you quit your job? Yes or no? And this is such an important question to ask. I think we've all had this question pop into our awareness at some point or another. And I don't think that it's an easy answer or the same answer for everybody. And so today is not going to be about talking about, yes, you should definitely quit your job and here's how to do it, or no, you should stay, here's how to make it more manageable. I am going to walk you through a broader understanding of the situation, a series of questions you can ask yourself. I'm going to give my own personal example so that by the end of today, you will leave with a bit more clarity on directionally where you think you might be going, but much more importantly, with a clear next step so that you can get more clarity. I know that when I first decided, because I left my role in leadership and educational leadership to start my own business, Lead Up Health. And when I was starting my business, I had a business coach and she said, so, are you the coach, the burnout leadership and well-being coach who's going to help people, say, oh, burnout is not your job, stay in your job? Or are you going to help women transition into a different career? And I was like, well, that is not, it's not one or the other. It is very, very much so. It depends on the person and on your specific context. And also, being a coach or being a podcast host isn't about giving you the answer. It's about empowering you to answer the questions based on your own truth and knowledge. And so that's what today is going to look like. You are here today, which means something is off. It means that you have identified that within your career, something is not feeling right. And I want to applaud you for listening to that intuition. You have clicked on a podcast, right, to listen to about whether or not you should leave your career. And that means that you listen to your intuition. You know that something is off, which means if something is off, something needs to change. And we're going to explore together today whether that something is within the context of your current role or taking a step towards transitioning into a different role or a different career or a different organization. We're going to start with the 4 big misconceptions about burnout. And it is critical that we start here and debunk these misconceptions before we go into specific steps that you can take. So the first major misconception around burnout is if you leave your job, everything will be better. If you could just get into a new organization, get a different boss, then you'll be less stressed. So the reason why this is a major myth is because wherever you go, there you are. So what I mean by that is that more often than not, burnout is pattern driven. And what I mean by that is if you are working late hours in this job, if you are feeling a lot of internal pressure and stress in the job you're in now, it is likely due to an internal pattern, a pattern that you may or may not be aware of throughout the day, that is actually guiding all of these decisions, leading to a burned out state. So, for example, there are multiple patterns: overfunctioning, people pleasing, taking on too much, always being on, seeking validation through performance. These often start in our childhood and they're often run on autopilot throughout the day, creating a nightmare of decisions that then lead us burned out. So, for example, with people pleasing, And the reality is, I used to think, I was like, I am not a people pleaser. I am, a no nonsense, feminist, etc. But I was wrong. Once I really started raising my awareness around why I was making certain decisions I was making, I was like, oh, yeah, this is due to people pleasing. So, just to say, if you are a woman, because of the way we have been conditioned, it is innate in us to want to people please, meaning we want people to like us. We want to control the way that we are perceived to a certain degree. And this is normal. This makes sense. Of course. Like, of course, I want people to like me, right? But what happens is when this goes into overdrive in work, is it can lead, this is a pattern, right? That could lead us to taking on too much. So, say, for example, I've got a packed calendar and my boss comes to me and is like, oh, so and so, I tried to give this project to them. They, it's not working out. Could you take it on? Well, I want my boss to think that I can handle things, that I'm going to absolutely knock this out of the water if my colleague couldn't. And so I'm inclined, if I don't pause first, I'm inclined to say yes. And then what happens? I say yes, I have the project, I open up my calendar, crap. There's when am I going to do this project? Right. And so this is one example. This may or may not resonate with you. You might have a different burnout pattern, but if this is an example of something that is happening in your current career or something like that, it is a personal pattern. It means that when you or when I or when whoever has this pattern goes to a new job, they're still going to have this internal pattern. And so in this example, going to a new job is not going to change anything because that people pleasing pattern is still going to be functioning. And so what would need to happen in this case? In this case, it is more about building the strategies internally to not fall into that burnout pattern. And then once you're able to lower the stress within your career, your current career, then maybe we can have a better lens of evaluating whether or not, in fact, we would still want to shift. So that's big misconception number one, that if you leave your job, everything will be better. You'll be less stressed, more fulfilled, etc. However, let's take a look at the opposite misconception as well, which is that I should be able to feel great in the job that I have now, that I can fix everything within the job that I currently have and it'll be okay. And this is a misconception because the reality is that your environment actively shapes your stress levels, behavior, and your health. So there is key research around this, right? We know that chronic stress is strongly linked to burnout and health issues. And research from the World Health Organization classifies burnout as tied to your job, workplace stress, lack of control, and misaligned values. Okay, so let's pause for a second here. Say that you have done all the internal work, you're setting boundaries, you're saying no, you are pausing before saying yes and letting that people pleasing pattern kick in. Say the internal work is done. But at the same time, you are misaligned to your organization, the values of your organization. You don't agree with what it is that they're producing, or you don't agree with the way that they treat their employees or the way that they want you to manage the people who report to you. Well, that's a misalignment of values, and that creates actual stress. If the organizational expectations, this was the case at my old job, is that you are in back to back meetings with no break to pee, let alone refill up your cup. Yeah, there's some work you could do around turning down certain meetings, saying no, proposing things depending on where you are, where your positional power is. But there's only a certain degree to which you might have control over that. And so that's something to really interrogate because job strain does affect physical health. If you're in a high demand what's called a high demand, low control job, you do have an increased risk of anxiety, depression, even things like cardiovascular issues, right? So there's decades of occupational health research here. Um, and the other piece is that emotional, um, you know, basically, we can catch stress from people around us. So that's why you've heard of this concept of co-regulation, where my nervous system is going to interact with whomever's nervous system I'm surrounded by. This is why co-regulation with children is so important, right? Entering with a calm state of being is more important than the words that I'm going to say. That's because my nervous system, my energetic field, and yes, it's measurable, actually interacts with those around me and vice versa. And so you can actually catch stress from people around you. So if you're in a high stress culture where everyone's stressed, you're catching that stress. And you could, sure, you could set up, you could do a lot of intentional work to combat that. Absolutely. And that's a lot of extra work. So if urgency is the norm, if overworking becomes expected, burnout to a certain extent can become contagious. So, and then your brain actually can adapt to your environment, right? Repeated exposure to this stress actually then trains your nervous system to stay in fight or flight or hypervigilance. And this then over time becomes your baseline. And so, if you're hearing this and you're in a stressful work environment, please allow this to validate you, right? This isn't in your head. You might not be doing anything wrong. Your environment does, in fact, condition your nervous system, right? And you can't, yeah, you can work on your nervous system regulation. Yes, you should work on those burnout patterns. And if you're in a work environment that is dysregulating you all day long, you might want to look for a new job. Okay. And so if that sounds panicky, it doesn't have to be overnight. There are some things we can do that I'll talk about that will make your current situation feel better. And it's a step by step process. So I want to touch on a couple other misconceptions about burnout. So, one is, and this is so interesting. Um, I know many of the women that I work with, and myself included, battle with this whole like, but I should be so thankful for this job. Why would I look for something else? So I'll give an example for myself. In my own situation, I absolutely battled this because I was in a meaningful job. I believed in the mission, right? It was to ensure, all kids had the chance to live a choice-filled life via education. I also was getting paid very well and in a leadership position. So, for a nonprofit, I had, I was in a leadership position. I was making a great salary and great health benefits, and I had meaningful work. And so when I started trying to figure out, like, gosh, do I want to stay here or not? Oh, and I should also mention, I was surrounded for the most part by wonderful people, like really great people who were also mission driven and whom I liked. And so when I started feeling this misalignment and this burnout, I almost was like, gosh, Nicole, you're getting kind of greedy here. Like, you already have what so many people wish that they had. And so there was some guilt there, or some, gosh, who am I to think that I could go on and find another job? Like, look at what you already have. But nonetheless, I was experiencing that. First, I was experiencing burnout, which I shifted out of within my job. But then I was feeling a tension of, this isn't, maybe this is like 80% it. But honestly, this isn't aligned to my highest gifts that I've been given. This does feel like it's not a perfect match for what I believe that I'm here to do. And so, in this example, I was being pulled by a vision beyond the work that I was doing. And so if that is happening to you, if you're feeling a bit of tension, like, oh my gosh, how could I even, like, I'm so lucky, I should just be thankful in any category of your life, but we're talking about career here. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to settle your body and ask yourself, what do I want? And allow yourself to be pulled by as big of a vision as you can hold. And that is okay. That is not being ungrateful. And the final misconception I want to address before we get into a few steps is that a job is just a job. Everyone, my sister-in-law has a job that's just a job. My friend has a job that's just a job. It's okay. Work is just work. And I understand this sentiment, first of all. I get it. It's that, the piece that I agree with here and that I think is a healthy perspective is that, yeah, I mean, goodness, work is a part of who I am and a part of my life. It is not my life. And I hope that for everybody, right? We don't want work to be our identity. And also, work is approximately 40 hours a week, give or take some, depending on, how demanding your job is and where the boundaries have been. And that's a lot of time you are giving of your precious life over to a job. And so I recently spoke with a friend, and she, with tears in her eyes, said, I wonder what it would be like to wake up every day and love my job. And what I will say to you is that I believe 100% it is possible to wake up to every day and love your job, specifically your job. It is not, some fairy tale thing to want for yourself. And it's something that I believe it's your birthright, right? Everyone has the right to wake up and do something that they like doing and that they're great at doing. Because when you're able to do that, you're able to step into your purpose. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone has to go get a job in nonprofit. It doesn't mean you have to be, your impact could be showing up and developing the people that you manage, or feeling fulfilled by making, if your thing is like organizations and processes, like the friend that I'm talking about, in her work and her job, wherever she is, she should be able to find work that is fulfilling and that she's making life easier for others through streamlining processes and making things more efficient, right? So this is really about knowing your strengths, knowing what makes you tick, and knowing that, yes, there is a job out there where you can absolutely live into your talents, and believing that. Um, so this is never really a black and white situation. And so what I'm sharing here are just some different perspectives to kind of hopefully broaden the way that you're thinking about your current work situation, right? This is never black and white. And in the end, there are going to be different decisions that make sense for you now, for the future you, and it's going to be different for each person. So, the core takeaways from this conversation around misconception is that, yes, your burnout or stress or being in survival mode could absolutely come from some of those patterns, those burnout patterns we talked about, over functioning, saying yes when we mean no, etc. And that is an internal job. And we're going to talk about some steps you can take there. And also, some environments absolutely amplify burnout. And so you really have to look at both, because if you only look at yourself, you might stay stuck in a job or in a career that isn't helping you to enjoy life to its full or meet your full potential. But if you only blame the job, then when you move on to that next job or next occupation, you might repeat the pattern. So, it's really interesting. I think that for myself, when I made this career shift, and I had already undone a lot of burnout patterns, I did take a lot with me. This, internal pressure and some of these patterns came back. However, this whole novelty can create awareness. So within this new context, I was able to see, Oh gosh, it was harder to go on autopilot, right? When the context is the same, it's easy to just kind of go into autopilot and you might not even realize the patterns you're in it. But when you step into something new, it does kind of help you to wake up. The brain is designed to wake up in new environments. And that is a lot of the time why initially people feel relief in a new job, right? It's not just a new job, it's this like awareness spike or this like recommitment to do things differently. And you can also make intentional choices within the role that you have. And so the real question to ask here isn't, should I quit? You want to ask yourself, am I burned out because of how I'm working, or is it where I'm working? And the next question and the next step really is, have I actually tested my capacity to feel better here? And we're going to spend a beat here. Because even if, as you've been listening to this, you're like, yep, it's my environment. Yep, it's my manager. Yep, it's this culture of urgency. I've got to go. The first step is always to make the choice to feel better today, right now, because you're beginning to shift your identity into someone who is going to be able to hold the next better version of yourself in a new job. And also, we've got to be practical, right? You can't just up and leave if you have a mortgage, healthcare, et cetera. So the first step for everybody, if you're going to stay or if you're going to go, if you've made up your mind after listening to this, like, yep, my environment is toxic, I've got to get out of here. The first step for everybody is to make a decision today that is going to feel better today. Because when you do that, you are going to, within your locus of control, could create a calmer you, a more regulated you, a happier you that can not feel stressed, that can feel more relaxed. And that is the first step, even if then the next step is to figure out, how do I transition out of here? You want to create a calm internal state to the extent of your abilities right now, because that's going to set you up for the next steps you're going to take. And if you've realized, actually, this is some inner work I need to do, this is where you stay and this is where you live for a while. And so I'm going to give you a couple of strategies here. The first strategy, and this is such a powerful strategy, is to take a look at your tasks for a given day and do what's called the 3 Ds. So the 3 Ds are do it. There are some tasks you're going to have to do, or D for delegate it. So what are some things that actually you could delegate that with to someone else that you work with? You could delegate it to your boss. You could delegate it to your coworker, or someone you manage. You could delegate it to your partner in a personal life, right? Or dump it, which means completely delete it. There's this concept where about 5% of what we do contributes to 80% of our success. So these 3 Ds are really trying to get at, what are some of the things that we have on our agenda that, because we're on autopilot, we're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to that meeting. It's a waste of time. I'm going to show up anyways. And really, that is having very little to do with your ability to effectively lead or to effectively meet your KPIs or whatever it is in work. Those things should be deleted. So do it, delegate it, or dump it. It's a very um, simple thing. It will take approximately 5 minutes every morning. Okay. So that is the first strategy, so that ultimately you're spending less hours working, you're getting real time back. And those things you can do with your real time back: in the middle of the day, go outside and stand in the sun, take a mini walk, go, pet your dog, whatever it is that's going to, throughout the day, start filling up your capacity, right? Relieving some of that stress throughout the day so that you're not constantly in survival mode. The second strategy might be my absolute favorite strategy that I have ever heard, um, which is, when you are asked to do something, when you receive an invite to a work meeting, or when your boss says, do you want to take on this project? What you don't want to do is say yes immediately. But what you also don't want to do is open up your calendar and just see if you have enough actual hours to complete the task. That's better than just saying yes, right? You're going to prevent working it in the evenings, etc. But y'all, here's a magical question that I heard that I'm just so excited to share with you. You want to ask yourself with everything that someone asks, personal as well, does this fit into the life that I want to create for myself? Not does this fit into my calendar? And so when you receive a task, say that, I have a great example of my manager at the time had asked me to take on this project with assessments, which did not play to my strengths and did not make sense for me to do given my ultimate KPIs and where we were going. And so the answer to him asking me to take on this project was a no, because it doesn't fit into the goals that I had for myself or my team within the organization. And also, it didn't fit into the life I wanted to create for myself. It wasn't the kind of work that I wanted to do. Now, I understand not everybody has the luxury of just saying yes or no. And absolutely, there were some projects that I had to take on because I had to take on. But when possible, a meeting. Does, does this fit into the life I want to create? No, yes or no. And so then what's going to happen is over time, you're going to see that when you look at your calendar, more and more of what's on your calendar is going to be something that you want to do. It's going to be an energizer. And then the third piece, and this is for those of you who are saying like, yeah, right, Nicole, I don't really have much say over the type of work that I'm doing, is to balance energy drains with energy boosts. So this is another great concept that I have recently learned about. And so an energy drain is just something that, you know what it is, it sucks the life out of you. That meeting, that task, it's like afterwards you want to go eat a pint of ice cream or you're like on edge, right? Energy drain. So we can't avoid those all the time. So can you then, next to that, can you couple that then with an energy boost? So something that fills up your bucket. So if you love to organize things, maybe after that draining meeting, you're doing some organizational work. Ideally, you're stepping outside, you're getting some fresh air, or again, petting your dog, whatever that energy boost is to fill your cup back up. Okay, so just to review, those were the 3 Ds. That's do it, delete it, or delegate it. Asking the question, does this fit into the life I want to create? And then when you have those energy draining activities, it's just a part of your day, can you pair it next to an energy boost? And the concept here is that you want to create relief in your current situation, because when you create it in your current situation, you are, one, better set up to make the decision. Do I leave this job or do I stay? But two, if you still want to leave, you're now doing it from a more spacious, regulated space. So if you are considering transitioning, the second step is to prepare, of course, right? So what I'd encourage here is not just throwing your resume out to a bunch of jobs that look a little bit better. It is getting real with understanding, what are the things that you want and what are some of these jobs actually like, especially if you're considering a change in field. And so this means starting to reach out and actually talking to people who have that job and really understanding day-to-day reality. So this is flipping the switch a little bit. It's not like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to get a job? It's like, no, let me actually understand if I would even want this type of job. Because when you do this slowly, right, we have created space in the calendar, we're more regulated, there's time to do real research and understand, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? What are the actual projects and tasks on a day-to-day basis? And do I even want that? Is that going to be a day full of energy boost or not? And so this is about, not fantasizing about a new career and a brand new life and new feel. And it's not about jumping into it. It's about taking small steps, intentional steps to really understand the day-to-day realities. That is something I wish I had done when I chose to start a job, I wouldn't have, I'm sorry, when I became an entrepreneur and start my own business, I likely would have still made the decision and I would have been so much more equipped with the reality. I think I walked in a little bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I think since that, working with folks, think this has been a really useful tool. And then you want to take small, safe steps, right? You don't want to blow it up overnight, of course. So for myself, what I did explore is I got certified as an integrated nutrition coach because that was something high interest to me, and it was a way of me seeing, like, do I like this enough to actually do this for real, right? It was a different way of testing. So you want to test your interest before making a major commitment. So when deciding it is time to leave, of course, you want to look at the reality of your financial situation and you want to ask yourself questions like, if I leave, what would happen? What would it look like if you're going to take a pay cut? What would that look like? Would I be willing, if you're going to start your own business, would I be willing to pull some money from my savings or whatever it is? What would that even look like? And of course, having those conversations with your partner. And there are definitely just to review, clear patterns that might mean it is time to leave. That's when there's a values misalignment, there's a toxic work culture, a burnout culture, when there's not room for growth or change. And when you've done that internal work, those things that we've talked about, and it still is not shifting it enough to get rid of that feeling that brought you here to this episode today, that feeling that something's off, there's something more for me. So I also want to revisit this concept of, you know, shifting your identity. So instead of thinking of like, oh, when I just have the new job, then my life will be different and I'll feel different. It is actually the reverse of that. It is, let me shift my way of being. So again, going back to those exercises we talked about around the delegating, whatever your burnout pattern is, shifting out of that, creating more internal alignment. So it's the be first. Then you will have then the skills, the way of interacting, the way of leading that will then give you that feeling of freedom. And so, in a perfect world, right, we are okay when everything's not okay. So, it is this shift when you're thinking about finding a new job of like, how can I escape? How can I get out of the situation to know how can I actually create internal safety, internal calm so that I can show up in a way that will ultimately give me that feeling, give me that job that I know that I want to have. And this is right now we're talking about, manifesting, but from a very science backed way. So, meaning when you make that shift, take the time to get clear on what you want, asking what version of you that life requires, and then begin to shift now. And so, in my own experience, as I shared, I did start making those internal shifts within my marriage, also within my leadership role, so that I had created more spaciousness in my day. I was doing work that I loved. I was proud of myself for who I was as a leader. I really shifted the way I showed up at work first. And then I had enough spaciousness to then again not be pushed by stress and let me get out of here and let me escape. But more so, I had the space to be pulled by this vision of this job not this job, it's not a job. I own my own business, but this career that I've created for myself now. So again, it's about becoming the version of you who can hold what you want. It's about building resilience and nervous system capacity so that you have that alignment. So in closing, you don't need to rush on a decision here. This isn't about like staying stuck or blowing up your life. It's not black and white like that, right? It's about becoming intentional. And as with all things, it starts with awareness, right? As you go throughout your work week, maybe start with just awareness. Ask yourself, where are you feeling stressed because of internal pressure versus what is actually happening at work, right? Are you working in the evening because you said yes when you really meant no? And really be honest with yourself about that. And then you can ask yourself, where is the actual type of work and energy stuck? So, where are you energized by the work? And can you delegate the parts that are energy sucks, right? To someone who likes doing those type of things. I worked with someone who loved everything I couldn't stand, like putting together charts and Excel sheets. And it was great because we could kind of balance our energy so that we both were filled up and doing our best work. And then asking yourself honestly, like, what is the culture of the place that my work right now? What is the actual environment? It was really interesting after I stepped away from my previous position when I started my own business. I went back and spoke. I had some catch-up meetings with a handful of them, and it was so interesting having that space. These are all wonderful people, but it's like they all kind of had this vibe of stress. And I remembered, oh yeah, that was me. And I couldn't see it when I was in it, right? But when I stepped away, I was like, oh yeah, that is like coming from that culture. So what is the culture with meetings, with expectations, with your managers and colleagues? Is it increasing your stress? And is it possible to manage that internally or no? And another thing, just remember, if you are staying in a job because it's just a job, everyone has a job, right? Or if you're staying in a job because you're like, oh, I should be thankful, right? Those are red flags. That has to do, you want to interrogate, why do I think that a life of ease, a life where I wake up with a purpose, a life where I wake up with enough time for my family and to have a job that's meaningful and fulfilling, you know, that is for you. That is for everybody. It is possible. And so if you're feeling like that's not for you, that's a sign that there's some beliefs that need to shift. So again, the goal isn't just to leave your job and find yourself burned out in a new one, but the goal also isn't just to suck it up, right? I mean, we've got one life here, 40 hours a week, right? Because you think you won't find anything better. So the goal here is what I call conscious career shaping, right? It is getting clear on what you want out of a career, what you deeply believing and knowing in your bones that yes, this can be yours. It is reasonable to want a job that fills you up instead of depletes you, and to take steps towards that, right? To surrender, not force, but take meaningful steps towards that, right? So again, that's start being the version of you who has the career now. Set limits now. Start doing more work you enjoy within your current role now. Set boundaries now. Lead like that boss you know you are now. The second is start taking logical steps towards your career. Reach out to people who have that job. Chat them up. Go get a certification in a topic that you love. So it's this combination of taking action and surrendering and trusting that things will unfold for you as you take aligned action. That's action that feels good. So, my friend, I hope that you heard some nuggets of wisdom that are helping you to shift the way that you're thinking about your career and whether you should leave or whether you should stay. And I encourage you just to take one small action today, do one step toward creating a career that feels good. And just remember that you deserve it. Until next time, burn beautiful loves. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode sparked something in you, subscribe, and I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to rate and review the show. It is the most powerful way to help other women find it. And if you know someone who is struggling or on the edge of burnout or simply wants to lead from wholeness, send this their way. Let's grow this movement together. To get exclusive insights, tools, and behind-the-scenes support, join the HERS Insider List at www.leaduphealth.com. And if you're ready to explore working together, whether through coaching or consulting, you can book a free consultation right from the site. Until next time, burn beautiful loves.